Hi everyone and welcome to another edition of Unfulfilled. Today I'm joined by Matthew from Reach. They work with retailers and brands who are looking to launch their business into the US and help with their cross-border finance. Matthew is their VP of Partnerships based in Austin, Texas. The team at Reach work exceptionally close with their clients and ensure they get the best setup possible to ensure they can grow their brands internationally and not have to worry about getting paid. Reach has a multi-currency gateway for Shopify Plus, which was launched in February of 2017, using merchants' feedback and competitive insights to lead the team to create the most robust global payment solution on Shopify Plus that exists today. So, without further ado, and to get my words out, I'm going to pass over to Matthew and tell us a bit more about himself, and we'll be covering his sort of 8 years at Reach and all his plans he's got for the future as well. So over to you, mate.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good rundown of what we do at Reach, but really just trying to help merchants sell globally. Lots of complexities with it, especially since the pandemic. People are really starting to look at international markets as a great
Yes.
growth opportunity. And so
Sure.
that's sort of what I've focused most of my career on is just helping e-commerce businesses scale globally, especially in the case of any sort of software sales or anything like that. You don't have the problems of shipping packages. So
Yeah.
it's been quite a wild ride. But yeah, I originally started my career in foreign exchange. Was like a Wall Street foreign exchange broker, and then kind of jumped into the world of global payments and e-commerce. So always something new, that's for sure. It's been an interesting space to follow these last few years.
Yeah. And how has it changed in the 8 years that you've been at Reach? I know you mentioned the pandemic had a big like shift change, I guess, but from your point of view,
Yeah, I think people's just purchasing behaviors have changed so drastically, and everyone in the e-commerce industry will always know there's always some big buzzword every year. A few years ago it was omni-channel, then it goes to a couple years later it's like headless, and now it's composable, and then it moves into AI, and there's always some sort of buzzword. And I think really what most people are really chasing is just consumer behavior trends. When omni-channel was really big, this was obviously pre-pandemic, where it made sense if you were a big online retailer to go and open up a boutique shop in Manhattan or somewhere where there was a lot of foot traffic, or high street, for example. And kind of depending where you were and where your shoppers were globally, you would open up an actual physical location, and then you had this omni-channel, come try it on in person, and then we'll ship it straight to your house. All that kind of stuff is just totally out the window now. But 5, 6, 7 years ago, that was a pretty cool business model. And so I think you're starting to see that shopping trends change over time, and all sorts of brands are just they're changing with the times. But yeah, the pandemic obviously shook the world in a lot of different ways, but specifically with consumer
yeah.
behavior, we saw that change quite a bit, because you're buying stuff online, you have no idea where it's from. You're not going to your normal stores to buy your stuff because everything was closed, and so you're buying a new pair of pants or whatever, and could be coming from Malaysia, could be coming from Canada, could be coming from the UK. You have no idea, and that's the beauty of online sales. But for the people making that sale, it is quite difficult. So that's kind of where I sit in spaces, is help them navigate that.
Nice. And has Reach always been a e-com sort of focused, or is it sort of just grown over time, sort of with the sort of changes in the market?
Yeah, it's definitely focused in the e-commerce space specifically. That's really where we started. Is e-commerce generally was just very underserviced, and we didn't really see a lot of real international payment solutions or tax infrastructure to help these businesses scale globally. And so, where we started to shift our effort over time, once we had a good foothold in the e-commerce industry, was just looking at digital sales, at B2B, and really the same principles of our business model apply to any vertical, including travel and stuff like that. But e-commerce is still very much so a focus of ours, just because, again, I still feel that it's pretty significantly underserviced market overall. Um, and most brands or retailers, they just want to sell their products. Sell t-shirts, like, just want to sell t-shirts, and you don't want to worry about
Yeah.
local consumer trends in Germany and how you need to be able to handle that. You need partners that you can basically plug in that'll help you navigate those waters, but not necessarily you know make you go and figure it all out on your own, in which case you're going to lose a lot of money and most of the time fall flat on your face. And, that's how you learn. That's how you grow as a business. But better to kind of anticipate those moves as much as you can.
And how do people find Reach? Like, how do you sort of have people come to you? What's your like business model in terms of attracting new merchants or retailers to yourselves?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. So we've been around for just under a decade, maybe about a decade now, and I've been with the company for about 8 years. So we were very small. It was a handful of us when I started, and yeah, I think really we've grown over the years mostly through word of mouth, and oftentimes it comes from clients who just said, I have this very specific problem and I need someone to help me, and we kind of fit that niche market. And I think that's where we've seen by far the most growth is just retailers talk to each other, and businesses talk to each other. They're trying to figure it out and learn from other people's mistakes. And it's kind of like the same thing in parenting or whatever. You talk to other parents like, hey, did your kid do this when they were 4? It's a very similar kind of thing for business owners. And so they're talking to each other, and naturally you get some organic growth through that because they say, hey, this partner very specifically helped me with this problem, and it was incredibly successful for us. And that's how we've always grown. We never really put a ton of money into marketing just because our
Okay.
model kind of spoke for itself. And yeah, I think word of mouth is definitely the easiest and best way to grow business over time.
100%. I completely agree with that as well. Because if you can deliver consistently for your existing business, like especially in this sector as well, it's so working like collaboratively and in partnerships. Like if you do a good
Right.
job, it will always eventually sort of come around again, won't it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's always the key. Putting all the pieces
And in
together
terms,
for them.
absolutely. And you mentioned you were one of the first sort of employees or sort of first handful of employees in Reach. Like, what's that? Because I see on like LinkedIn now you're around sort of 150-ish sort of mark now of employees. Is that right as a business?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's been a
It's
wild
quite a
ride
big.
for a long time. Yeah, it was a big jump. I would say for a long time it was very slow growth. Um, we focused a lot on large enterprise businesses, which are just slower movers. They take a long time to go live and make changes to their website, things like that. Over time, we started to cater to the SMB audience. That's like in 2017, we launched our solution for Shopify Plus, which at the time was still SMB overall, considering the market. There really wasn't a ton of enterprise on Shopify. And as we continued to scale that business, we were able to kind of hit both the enterprise and the SMB market, sort of diversify our portfolio a little bit, which helped grow faster, just at a higher accelerated pace. But yeah, it's definitely been a wild ride. I mean, just changing a company from 10 people in a room, but we would do an all hands, and we'd all stay at one hotel and just kind of reserve one of the small business conference rooms, to now we got 150 employees across, I don't know, probably 10 countries or something like that at least. It's it's definitely interesting just to see the growth, but all sorts of fun challenges with that, and we've learned a lot along the way, as most people have in the past few
Yeah.
years. So yeah.
You mentioned their challenges. I know that's mainly in regards to headcount growth, obviously, and the challenges
Yeah.
that brings with regards to, we'll discuss this later on probably, but in regards to like keeping that same ethos and like culture within the business. But aside from that challenge, what other ones have you sort of come across, or do you come across most regularly that you are fixing for your clients?
Yeah, I think, well, just as a company, one of the things that I believe a lot of fintech players in particular have struggled with over the last couple of years is their identity. Um, Even for us, we sort of have moments where we'd be like, well, what if we kind of fit into this segment? But I think one of the things we've been very good at is staying consistent with our identity, which is driven a lot by corporate, or yeah, like corporate culture, whatever you want to call it, right? Like internal culture that drives your
Yeah.
identity externally. And then how you are identified externally is how you're perceived by your prospective clients. So yeah, we maintained a pretty good aspect of staying true to sort of what our core business model is, versus a lot of our competitors have not over the years. And just other people that kind of work in the space in the ecosystem definitely have struggled with that. But I think for our merchants, the biggest challenge by far is taxes. Uh, the Ever since the pandemic, right? Everyone started buying stuff online, and basically uh, Brexit really kicked it off. But the pandemic accelerated it drastically, and it's just duties and taxes. Like trying to get, if you're a proper e-commerce merchant, right? Like a brand selling, cosmetics or whatever, or you're just an online retailer and you sell clothes, it's incredibly hard to ship packages cross border these days, because each of the governments that you're actually importing products to get to that end consumer, they all want a piece of the pie. And if you're not registered, if you don't have everything set up properly and your compliance is not solid, your customers are going to have a bad experience, and it's going to cause you a lot of headaches over time. And even to make it compliant is a lot of headache and time invested. And again, it's a lot of e-commerce businesses are just very focused on, I just want to sell my product and I want high conversion rate, but I don't care about all the back end operations. Like I just want it done, right? I want to be able to focus on growing my business, but not necessarily the complex operations of supporting that business. And yeah, I would say taxes are probably the number one thing. The other thing too are just like general issues with, again, kind of going back to that theme of consumer behavior. You have consumer behaviors that shift. So we saw this huge boom in buy now, pay laters, for example. And then there was a huge default period where a lot of people were not basically paying back for all this stuff they bought on Klarna or Afterpay or whatever. And so now consumer behavior is shifting back a little bit, but all these businesses were really investing time and energy to get all these new payment methods on their website. And then, they see very high adoption initially, and then it starts to fade off over time. And now they're trying to think of, well, what's next? What's coming up next? And being ahead of that curve versus being behind it is very difficult to do.
Uh,
So I would say between those two things, government legislation that causes red tape in trying to sell internationally and grow your audience and expand your business overseas is kind of one piece. And then the other piece is catering to that audience and making sure that you're maximizing, conversion rates and ensuring that everyone that you can get to your website is going to actually convert. Um, that's always the two things I see in today's world as big
yeah.
sticking points for a lot of businesses.
Yeah. Who knew we'd get talking about taxes so quickly?
I know, right? Everyone's favorite subject.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, and with yourself, like Matt, why do you love what you do at Reach? Like, what is it that gets you like excited about doing this day in day out, and continue to drive the business forward like you have done for 8 years?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to just helping people understand very complex topics. That's kind of the intrinsic value that drives me in partnerships and sales. And I've just always kind of been a commercially facing person. And it's cool to be able to see a chat through with a business owner. They understand they have this certain issue, but they don't know what the cause is. So we kind of peel back the onion, we come back to the layers, and then we finally find what that cause is. And they have that light bulb moment. I think that that's kind of something that drives me quite a bit in terms of, just being able to continue going at it, between that and the ever changing landscape. If the
Yeah.
if the landscape wasn't changing all the time, I think it would be very difficult to do the same thing every day in and day out. But because global payments specifically is so vast, and there's so many different things changing, you have new legislations every year in different regions, and you just kind of have to follow what's going on. And then, 10 years ago, everyone was talking about China. Now everyone's talking about India. But accepting payments in India is crazy hard, just as it was 10 years ago to accept payments in China. And so you kind of follow these trends again of consumer behavior, but also like what's trending in the market, and then how you kind of handle all of that as a business owner and how you can outsource it to some of your partners. I think that's kind of the key. Um, and just, yeah, the complex landscape I think a lot of people have to deal with in order to operate a business. You have your OMS, your WMS, your ERP, all these different technologies that are plugged into your business, and then trying to make them all sing and work together nicely. That's also something I see a lot of business owners struggle with. It's so fragmented, and that's where the partnership ecosystem has shined quite a bit. Is for people to understand, like, okay, I get what your tech stack does, and like where these guys are at, and trying to build that complementing strategy, so that way you're kind of painting the full picture. That's definitely another driver, I would say.
Yeah, nice, very good. And in when you sort of look at what makes Reach distinct from other like global payment sort of providers and
Mm-hmm.
being able to resolve those like cross-border sort of finance issues, what would you say are like your again, like you have these conversations I guess daily in terms of these sort of conversations, so how are you able to showcase why you're the best?
Yeah, I think it just comes down to modularity. There's a lot of providers out there that it's kind of a my way or the highway situation where, this is how our tech stack works. This is what our solution looks like. This is what the consumer experience is going to feel like. And you just have no flexibility to customize it. That's really what we built our model around, was focusing on that customization and allowing people to basically say, hey, here's the core feature of the business, but you can pick and choose and use its features and functionality as you please and build it into your experience. And in that sense, I think compared to a lot of our competitors, we're much more like a back end, like white labeled solution than we are sort of a takeover and we're going to help you with your cross border sales solution. And that's really where I think distinctly we fit and what the market knows us as well, as we're much more like kind of that modular pick and choose versus an a
Nice.
la carte.
Okay. And without getting, I guess, too technical, in terms of like how the back end sort of function works and how I guess the user sees it in comparison to how
Mm-hmm.
the MD of Pants Limited, whatever you want to call the company, like
Yeah.
what's the sort of the back end sort of functionality that they like can see and they can use?
Yeah. So it's really just, at the end of the day, it's really just payments. So we typically will integrate to whatever types of software they're using, like as an order management system, because in an order management system, you
Uh-huh.
have to see the payment has to come in. If you need to issue a refund, if there's a chargeback on the order, like you have some general place where everything is managed. And so we typically integrate to all of those. And if it's proprietary, if the merchants built in themselves, then we'll integrate to that as well. Um, and that kind of allows them to not have to change the way that they're handling their operations today in order to continue doing their business. Um, and that's kind of what I mean is like a lot of other sort of competitors in our landscape, or perceived competitors in our landscape, are absolutely like, okay, cool, so you have your order management system, but you're going to have to now come into our software and issue a refund here, or you're going to have to come in and like look for a transaction here, instead of just having that all seamlessly integrated into whatever they're using. A lot of them will kind of say, now you have to pop into our stuff. Um, and I think I mean, that's like a whole new training, your entire customer service team and your accounting team. And there's a lot of people that are affected by that kind of shift. And so I think that from our perspective, again, when we look at what it really is on the back end, when I say back end, it's almost like we're a ghost. We try to be a ghost. So it's like everything that you're using today, you won't really see a shift. You'll see benefits from a commercial perspective. Your conversion rate should go up, your costs will go down, but really from an operational perspective, we're trying to ease your burden, not necessarily add to it. So a lot of the times we basically just seamlessly integrate to whatever backend they're using, and then they do get settlement reports from us. So typically their accountants will have to take a look at our settlement reports, as they would with any payment
Yep.
processor like PayPal or Stripe or whoever. Um, but yeah, other than that, we try to just yeah make it as easy as possible.
Mm. It's a great way of doing it, isn't it? Because as you say, if you're getting being brought on board to help a solution and you are able to actually not add more complexities almost, that's in my mind, that's what I would think would happen. Like if you're looking to grow from, let's say, UK to US, that seems like a huge jump. So being able to make the ability to get paid simple, 'cause that's what we're all trying to make sure we do, obviously, is drive that revenue number, of course. The fact that it's easy is a bit of an, in a simple terms, like a bit of a no-brainer, right? But it sounds like actually it's
Hmm.
not the norm.
Yeah, I think it's I think a lot of times it's just something that's really often overlooked. Um, Good example is most people don't understand. Like I'm based in the States, you're in the UK. If I had a e-commerce shop, Pants Limited, and I'm selling pants to you, if you try to make a purchase on my website, about 20% of the time, your bank or anyone from the UK, your bank who issues you a credit card is going to decline the transaction because I'm based in the US and you're based in the UK. So it's
Right.
cross border. And as a business owner of Pants Limited, I have no control over that. It's your bank making that decision. It's your bank's algorithms that are saying, "Oh, well, we're issuing credit to Luke. Like we're not gonna make this transaction happen. He just bought coffee in London. Now he's trying to buy coffee in the or he's trying to buy pants in the U.S." That's like that's kind of the business model and where we focus on is we don't care where the merchant is based. We don't care that I'm based in the States. We care that you're based in the UK, and that's kind of where we make this whole thing come full circle. Is um, we really are focusing in on the consumer.
Yeah.
It's basically like how you bring Amazon's shopping experience on your website. Like how do you compete with Amazon? And from a payments perspective, it's very difficult to do. It can cost you millions and millions of dollars of investment and time and years of infrastructure that you have to build. And that's kind of what we focus on. It's like, why don't you just outsource that and you'll have a better experience for you and your shoppers. But yeah, it's always I think it's mostly a struggle of people understanding what their problems are. I think a lot of times business owners they're looking in the wrong places. If I told most business owners that 20% of their cross-border transactions were being declined, they wouldn't believe it. They would be like, "Oh, no way, we would know about it. People would contact us." They say, "Oh, my credit card didn't work." I was like, "Yeah, maybe 1 in 100 people will contact you, but most of the time, unless it's really bad, if it's like under 50
Yeah.
or if it's like 50% decline, then maybe you'll get a lot. But like 20% is pretty average, and that's pretty industry standard. And you're just not going to see that unless you really dive into the data. And so sometimes again, it comes down to like unveiling the curtain for that business owner to essentially walk them through like these are the problems that you have for these particular markets you're selling into, and this is why you're not seeing that conversion rate at 3%. You're seeing it at 0.8% in this market, and
Mm.
here's 10 reasons why. Um, and then you just walk them through the landscape of like, well, how do I solve all 10 of these problems? And oftentimes I can only solve 3 or 4 of them, but through the partner ecosystem, that's how you try to put together all 10. And that's what makes you sticky, right? You put together good
Yeah.
people that are easy to work with, that get it, and you put it together, and then any CEO is going to look at that and say, "Oh, yeah, well, this makes sense. These guys are doing it all for me, as long as it's not an insane cost. Why would I try to go do this all on my own?" So it's kind of that build versus buy mentality. But I think a lot
Yeah.
of times, especially with cross border payments, it's just all about like understanding what the actual problem is and then how to address it, of course.
Yeah. Again, this sounds so simple, but it's just a lot of business. It really is like I remember my first boss always said to me, "Keep it simple," in terms of like the process you're trying to set up or whatever it is. Like just don't overcomplicate things, and if you do something simple and do it well, then it's just a much better way of doing things. It sounds like
Yeah.
exactly what Reach has sort of done, hence probably why they've grown so well over the years.
Yeah, exactly.
In terms of like speaking about, I mentioned already around like integration and all that sort of stuff. It sounds like it's, I won't say seamless. I don't want to put you on, on say it's as easy as that. Of course, I'm sure there are some teething problems that happen every now and again. But
Yeah.
in terms of Like, can you pick out a couple of examples of clients that you've been able to resolve their problem, and then what it's meant for like their growth of their business, please?
Yeah, good couple good examples that we've kind of worked with. BlendJet is a huge company. They were based out of California. They sell like portable blenders, massive. I think they're the number one selling portable blender. It's probably yay big. It's yeah, maybe 12 to 16 ounces. And Yeah, it's quite interesting because they were really scaling both domestically and internationally. They scaled very quickly, but from an international perspective, it just really the consumer experience wasn't as optimal initially before we had launched on their website. And as soon as we launched like a better consumer experience, local currency, local payment methods, the true local processing that we talked about, where we're using a bank that's local to the customer versus where they're based in California. Um, yeah, I think their sales just really started to skyrocket, and it's a good testament to just making some small changes on your site, which for them probably cost no more than 20 hours of development work. And they had a relatively sophisticated setup. And now all of a sudden, their sales are increasing by 3, 4x internationally. And so that's kind of where I think a lot of people just don't realize that there are options out there. And they typically will look at whatever the easiest thing is or the first thing they can grab without really doing due diligence. And that's obviously one thing we have to work on as an organization is, more marketing, right? To be able to get out there more. But we just do that through the partner ecosystem. We do it through organic growth, and that seems to work real well. Um,
Uh-huh.
but yeah, I would say that that's a good example. Another one is a swimwear brand out of Australia, Aussie Bum, and they were having a very similar issue that we just talked about with my pants company selling to you in the UK, but they're an Australian swimwear brand, um, and basically they were selling into the US predominantly, and their authorization rates, which is like the success rate of a payment on the website, it was maybe 60, 65% of their business. And when they launched with us, we were able to get it well over 90%. It's like 95, 96%, which is pretty industry benchmark.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, it really had a huge impact in their top line revenue. And just talking to the owner, it's all about, well, we want conversion rates. We did this to optimize our checkout so it's a little bit faster. But then if only 6 out of 10 people that are trying to check out or 7 out of 10 people that are trying to check out are actually successful, what's the point of all the other investment? Um, again, you're kind of digging in the wrong places, but a lot of people, they just don't know. These guys were much more sophisticated and they really understood the problem. They just didn't know what the solution was. The alternative was they go, and they're out of Byron Bay, Australia. So the alternative is they go set up a shop in the US and they go set up a shop in Europe. And that was just not what they wanted to do. They wanted to be a small brand, direct to consumer, based out of Australia. They didn't want to be this big multinational conglomerate. They just wanted to stay small and a lean and mean team, and they still are. They're a fantastic company to work with and a great brand. Um, and their sales were able to, go through the roof just because of some small tweaks we made. And again, probably a more significant investment. You asked about the technical side on their example because their whole website is bespoke. So it's not running on a platform, whereas BlendJet, excuse me, BlendJet is on Shopify Plus. So it does depend a little bit in terms of what your infrastructure is on whether or not we can do an integration in 20 minutes or, whether or not it could take, a couple months of some development work. Um, but in theory, the revenue is always there. I think oftentimes, for example, if you see a business that's doing 20 to 25 million a year in GMV, we're going to add about $1 million to their top line revenue, or their bottom line
Yeah.
cost as well. And that's normally what we see quite a bit is, it's a game changer.
Yeah, it is. Okay. So I did sort of talk about this a little bit earlier on, but we didn't sort of dive into the question, I guess. But with the growth you've had from the handful to 150 you are now, how have you kept that same like culture or vision or values, if you will, with that expanding team and internationally as well? You mentioned how have you been able to do that?
Yeah, it's a tough one. Um, yeah, I think naturally we grew very fast. In the beginning of the pandemic, I think we had added maybe we 3x'd our workforce in a matter of 8 to 10 months, which
Wow.
was really intense. And I think the biggest issue that we ran into was just finding the right leadership and then the right people that really understood that culture. And I think the way that we were able to maintain it over time is there's still a handful of us that have kind of built the company from the ground up that are still here and obviously in executive positions. And it's a top down approach, right? It's if you want to have, our CEO, for example, he's founder CEO, open door policy, right? It doesn't matter if you're like a low level customer service person, like you can call him at any time. And trying to have that type of culture is important for us, and maintain that and then also encourage it. With a grain of salt, of course. Like don't come banging on the CEO's door demanding a raise or whatever. Every couple of weeks. But the idea is like, hey, what's our strategy? Like, why are we different from here? Or hey, like, what do our numbers look like right now? And just total transparency. I think is the way that we've kind of led the business. But there's definitely a certain type of person I think that fits well because we have an interesting business model. It's very complex. It's incredibly situational. And so we try to find those right types of personalities, I think, and that's really where we've shined in terms of just our recruiting aspects is getting the right sort of players in the room, and then maintaining those players. Obviously, all companies have churn over time, but really kind of focusing on those people that resonate well with our culture.
Uh,
Those are the people that we kind of promote within and really focus our energy and efforts into helping them exceed both personally and professionally. But I think those are the types of people that have helped us maintain our vision at the company, uh, which again bleeds into external and how it's perceived and all of that. So
yeah.
yeah, but it is an interesting balance. I've seen a lot of companies that had similar growth and maybe different proportions, but it's gone completely in the opposite way. Things get toxic and there's politics and there's all sorts of stuff. It can get messy pretty quick. So we've done a really good job, nipping that in the butt when we can.
It is tough though, isn't it? I say because you mentioned. I'd be keen to understand like what it is that makes the hires, like what it is you see in their eyes or in their answers, or what it is that actually you see. But obviously, these are sort of things that we hear all the time. Is the culture and the values piece and being a fit for the business is so much more important than the actual like skill set that they walk in with. If that makes sense.
100%. Yeah, as long as they've
So
got the hustle and they have the willingness to learn, it's all about the personality. I don't care if you're, an MBA from Harvard and have an incredible amount of payments background or
yeah,
e-commerce background. I don't care. Like it's like if you don't have the vibe, then you're not going to fit well in our company. And I think that took us a while to figure out to a degree, and as it does with a lot of companies that scale quickly, because the original cohort of you know a handful of us, we all had that. We just didn't really realize it until we started
yeah,
adding more and more people, and over time you start to realize it pretty quick. You're like, okay, I see what this is now. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting one.
yeah. How many of you are still within that original sort of cohort? How many are still like the OGs, if you will, from the business?
Yeah, probably like 7 or 8 of us. Um, I think when I joined, there were maybe 12, 13 people, and there's probably still
Yeah,
7 or 8 of us, which is definitely a strong testament to
it is.
all of us really sticking it out and loving and believing in the business, and enjoying working here. So yeah, it's an interesting ride for sure, but yeah, we've kept a pretty good amount of the original OGs.
Yeah, that's very good. It's very good. And with regards to like onboarding, like for example, how big is your team, Matt? How big is your sort of your partnership sort of team?
Yeah, so I recently just took on sales as well. So my whole team is about 6 people,
Okay.
7 people in total, including myself. So it's pretty lean for the amount of revenue that we kind of book, and we really try to focus on, you know, high touch experiences, not only for our clients, but also for anyone that goes through our interview process. So a lot of times, and I know a lot of people kind of hate this, but we do want to have we have a relatively lengthy interview process because again, it comes down to that vibe and that culture. And like, one thing I always like to look for when I'm adding people to a team, for example, is like, do you have empathy? Can you put yourself in the other person's shoes and understand what they're going through, why they're struggling, why they are disagreeing with like whatever you're trying to tell them, or maybe not believing what you're telling them? Can you actually flip it around, get into their shoes, understand like, oh, okay, well, I can see they got burned by this before, and some other sales guy lied to them, and or partnerships guy or whatever, right? That's kind of where I think I look for that, and it's very difficult to do that in like a 2 or 3 round interview process of 30 minutes
Yeah.
a piece. It's just almost impossible, right? So you have to kind of do like thought exercises and things like that, which I really like to do as part of my process. And you know, um, I think some people can obviously be annoyed by it, but I think the people that really understand what I'm trying to achieve in that interview process will respect it because they understand like, hey, you're making an investment in me as much as I'm taking a risk on you and making an investment in potentially coming to this company. And so we better make sure we're making the right decision. And I think that's kind of the way we've approached it, but definitely a small, lean and mean team, which is why it's a little bit more
Yeah.
competitive to get into it. Versus trying to have like a larger team that churns faster. I'd much rather operate with a much smaller team that has a longer tenure, which so far so good.
Good. Yeah, I get it. I mean, in terms of that process, when you're dealing with like candidates, do you sort of explain to them what the process is going to be from the get go so they understands what they're going to go through? Yeah,
Oh yeah,
that's so
hundred
important.
percent.
If you don't do that, then you'll lose people so easily as well.
Yeah, and normally I kind of in the way we've always done any sort of interview process is we're really just we're transparent from the get go, but a lot of it is not super formal. I would say like it's like okay, cool. I can read your
Yeah.
LinkedIn resume or your resume and your CV. Like I don't care about that. I care about who you are. And so most people are a little bit, you know, I would say just confused because most of the first round interviews are just a casual conversation. Of just like, cool. So what do you like to do? Who are you? Like, tell me about yourself. What are the things you like to do in a job every day? And that kind of stuff. Just pretty casual versus like a strict series of interview questions. But yeah, I think
Yeah,
expectation setting is super important in the hiring process.
it's massive. Yeah. But I think
Yeah.
also going back to what your process is, i.e., that first stage is chilled, and because I've always got that vibe from you as well. You're obviously very relaxed, which is great, obviously, but at the same time, I'm sure you can like, just like turn and be very like just down the line in terms of let's get this shit done. Like we need to deliver our
Totally.
number. Not being a dick about it, but just being like
Right.
just
Just
like
being
let's
real.
just crack on. Like yeah, I'm happy to be like relaxed during the process and whatnot, but as long as you can turn that switch and you can get out there and meet your partners and be in front of your merchants, getting ahead of any problems, and I say showing the empathy element, like that's the way you're going to succeed in a firm like Reach.
Yeah. 100%. Um, yeah, you got to be upfront with people, and it's kind of a work hard, play hard mentality. It's like, yeah, like you said, right? You can be casual and cool as much as you want until when shit hits the fan and you really got to start grinding. Like you better be able to turn it on and stay focused and get it done. And that's because you're still working at a small company at the end of the day. Whether or not you're an agency shop running with 5 people plus the founder, or you're an enterprise SaaS company that's got 2,000 employees. Like I think at the end of the day, a lot of these companies are still startup-y in the way that they operate. And the ones that try not to be startup-y oftentimes have terrible company cultures. Um, at least the ones that have scaled quickly. They went from 100 employees 3 years ago to a couple thousand employees now, and they're trying to be, buttoned up in corporate. Like their founders are still startup-y. Like their founders are still going to have that grit of just, hey, we need to get it done. We need to get it done now. And that doesn't go away, I don't think, until you have, other people. You need to have your founders churned basically out of your C-suite in order for that to really go away from a top down culture perspective. Yeah, so I think
Agreed.
it's important to tell people that they
Nice.
know that they got to be on point.
Yeah, I get it. Can you share like any takeaways to, for example, if someone's watching this and they're going through this, they know they're going to have to scale their business, they're going to have to sort of grow it, or they're sort of planning on doing that. What would you say like the takeaways you would give, like if you're with your mate at a bar having a pint, like what would you say to them? Like just make sure you follow this, or you have like this in your mind, or what is it you think is that nugget or two you'd give someone?
Yeah, I would say definitely make sure someone that is close, like someone that emulates company culture in that respective department, has an interview with that candidate. If you're scaling the company, like make sure in order to keep that culture and understand that the vision of the company cannot change, or maybe it does need to change as the market evolves and the company evolves. But whoever emulates that culture best in that department, make sure that person has eyes and ears on that employee, a prospective employee. That would definitely be number one in terms of scale. Number two, hire fast, fire fast. If you see something that's not working within the first couple months, you gotta nip it in the butt before it gets it flusters.
Yeah,
It's just
that's good.
it's a hard thing to say, and I know it sounds like heartless, but I've seen every good efficient business that maintains its company culture has that mentality. Um, and I don't necessarily believe in the hire fast part. It really depends on your your metrics and your timeline and your recruiting and what department you're recruiting for. Like I take my time with hires, for example. But if someone is not a right fit, you have to nip it in the butt pretty quickly. And I think that that's a really hard thing for a lot of people to do. So when you do hire people, make sure they're the right fit and keep an eye on it. And again, always have that person who emulates the corporate culture or the company's culture as much as possible to like have eyes on those new employees to make sure that they're kind of passing the vibe check, if you will. Um,
Yeah, that's your thing, is it? The vibe check.
yeah, that's the vibe check. Yeah, and then yeah, third thing, yeah, I would say be transparent. Um, be transparent with your clients. Be transparent with your employees. If the company has 3 months of runway, like your employees better know that. It's messed up to just be like, oh, sorry guys, we're closing shop. That's not fair. And I think you have to, whether they're in the interview process or whether they're a tenured employee, like treat your company or excuse me, treat your employees with respect, and your clients too. And I think that will always, no matter how your culture changes or sways as your company grows and evolves in the market, as long as you have like a level of, you can be casual and you can be chill, but if there's no respect in that, or there's a lack of respect rather, I think that will certainly start to pop up in your external presence as well as your internal presence. And so I think as long as you keep that notion of respect with everything you guys do, you'll be able to maintain that culture well. Even if it shifts and kind of moves around, at least you'll always have that as sort of a benchmark. Um, so yeah,
Yeah,
those would be my three takeaways.
excellent, excellent. Matt, that's all, mate. Thank you ever so much. Like it's class to hear about Reach and the expansion that it's had, and the sort of changes that it's made to like these businesses and their growth strategy as well. And long may it continue. And yeah, like I said, I've definitely going to think a few people who I sort of speak with who are looking at that international sort of thing. And once that happens, then we can sort of look at intro and across as well.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
That was
Much
good to
appreciated.
chat.
Okay, mate.
Appreciate
Well,
it.
yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.